And we're going to be talking about art glass. In particular, we're going to be talking about the artist Robert Held. And he has done fabulous work, but we used to know him when he sold to us out of the back of his car. But that's coming up, folks. Right now, what do you want to talk about? What can you tell us about cut glass, Jeff?
Well, number one is that it was never designed for the lower tiers of the economic spectrum. This was always expensive. But the other thing was that we had the finest glass in the world because we had the finest sand. And it ran from western Pennsylvania up through Ohio and up through Michigan. And all the glass companies, if anybody ever noticed, were basically western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and I'm talking about all of them. And the reason was that the glaciers had ground the rocks and things that were in front of them and deposited this super long-grained fine sand, and it was endless. The only thing that made it expensive was shipping. And quite frankly, J.P. Morgan came to an agreement with the glass manufacturers that made it to where it was profitable to ship finished wares all over the world from that central area of the country.
How did they ship them?
They shipped them in barrels, big wooden barrels filled with sawdust and things, and he reduced the rates on the basis of the weight. But instead of having a freight car full of ironworks or whatever, a lot of the barrel was nothing but air because they were keeping the glass from being damaged. And shipping the glass was always a problem.
So they always expected to have some breakage.
Always expected to have some breakage. And one of the things that jewelry stores around the country had the capability of was repairing and regrinding cut glass to take the nicks, the dings, and the chips out. Yeah.
Interesting.
But the other part of that is that a lot of the jewelry stores were also where you went to buy your eyeglasses.
Right.
So they were already set up to grind glass. They knew how to work it, so they just expanded their repertoire to increase the income that they had off of crystal and the cut glass.
Now, cut glass, you were talking about Ohio, Steubenville?
Fine place for cut glass.
Yeah, there you go. So when you think about cut glass, that's what you think about.
Well, that is one of the major manufacturers, and that's one of the major areas. Cut glass, though, was circulated around the world. It started off in Western Europe, and then it just evolved into the United States as the German immigrants came in. They already took the technology with them. And they found this super fine sand that made the clearest of glass without bubbles, without the inherent little color flaws or anything else. It's just super pure glass.
Now, what about Waterford, though, Crystal?
Oh, Waterford's fine, but it was a special place. It was Waterford. The sand was created basically the same way, except it was created by ocean waves rather than a glacier.
Okay.
Now, cut glass is probably one of the most misidentified things there is. There's over 500 books written about cut glass.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about the books and the experts on cut glass is they all reference each other.
So everybody is an expert, and everybody uses everybody as an expert.
That's correct. And they have written books on cut glass since the 1800s, late 1800s, 1880s, 1890s, right on up through the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s. And the high point on antique cut glass was in the 1990s, quite frankly. And everything since then, it held its value for a while, and it right now the best bargains there ever were in the last 70 years are right now on buying cut glass. But the biggest thing is that the identification and things are some of the most ridiculous interpretations of what is. They don't logic things out. They just reference another particular quote expert.
Okay.
Now, here's what we do. I always figured that the people that made it knew what the devil they were talking about.
Right.
And if they identified something as a particular object and particular usage, that was a lot more reliable than any book that
Right.
was written for the sole idea of promoting and selling cut glass.
Okay.
What we have are the original catalogs
Oh, wow.
with the description and what it was used for.
Now, that's really interesting because there's a lot of misnomers, I understand, about things and what they're supposed to be used for.
Yes, here's a simple one.
Toothpick
These-
holder, right?
Huh?
Toothpick holder, right?
And they're identified as such in a lot of these catalogs and a lot of these books that identify the values of cut glass and things. But when you really think about it, would you put toothpicks on a table for somebody to pick their teeth during a meal or after a meal?
Well, why not, Jeff?
Well, I can't picture anything more disgusting. However, these were never designed for that. They were designed for, one of the things that they had were carrot sticks,
Okay.
peppermint sticks, and they used a lot of sugar cane for their coffee sweeteners, and also just in between course to
I mean, they'd suck on the sugarcane sticks.
clear the palate.
Okay.
All right,
So that's what those were really created for.
that's what they were really created for, not toothpick holders. Now you could use them for that.
Sure.
And here's another thing. Some people said, well, how would I know the age of this bronze and cut glass ashtray? Well, one of the easier ways to know is that when they cut glass to be an ashtray, for cigarettes, you could put your little finger in it and the groove would be tight. When they were for cigars, which was almost all before 1900, you put your first finger in and it's tight.
This looks like it's more for cigars, this piece you have
This
here.
is for cigars, so you know that the probability is that this was made prior to 1900, before Duke actually started making the cigarettes for mass consumption.
Well, and the cigars, of course, always were hand dyed.
Cigars were always hand rolled.
Sure.
All right, now
Well, how do you tell whether something is cut? I mean, I know some of this cut glass I could cut my finger on. This one doesn't appear to be as ability for me to cut it, but it definitely has deep grooves and everything. in
well,
it.
it has the deep grooves and they are sharp. They're just bigger.
Right. Okay.
That's the only thing that's different. I mean, the fact that the grooves are deeper and larger, you have less surface to cut you with.
Sure. Well, and then when you take like this piece, this is what for celery or
That's a celery.
okay, and it's got what's this called where it's very sharp all the way around it? That tooth,
Tooth.
hound's tooth or something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, it has various names, but all of them have the word tooth in them.
So therefore, for multiple, it's teeth, right?
Right. And
Sorry.
the neat thing about it was that when these were sold, they were sold at, when you picked it up and walked out the door with it, you owned it.
Okay.
It was one of the few things in
No
the
returns
no returns,
because
because that they could guarantee how it was when they put it in your hand. They couldn't guarantee how it would be an hour after you owned it.
right.
And one of the things that's neat on the table here, everybody identifies these as ice buckets.
Okay.
Well, when you think about it, one of the enemies of cut glass is extreme of hot and cold.
Right.
It actually can crack it, type thing.
Right.
And yes, it was ice of a type thing, but what they did was put water in it and put ice in it that way.
And, you know, there's different patterns, isn't there, for the cut glass? This is looks like kind of a thistle. I'm not sure if that's correct, but...
You're correct.
Okay.
I mean, you had Comet, you had Sunburst, you had a lot of different names for it. Some of the identification books have simplified it, but they kind of blended things. But the original manufacturers had a very specific name for their lines. And each line was very jealously guarded on whether they would share their design with somebody else, which they did not do.
Well, how about people copying a design?
And they did.
Did they?
And they did.
Yeah. Now, how do they actually do cut glass, though?
The cut glass is formed in sheets and then folded to the position that it's at, type deal. Some of it's molded, and then they cut it once it comes out off the mold. But usually it's a sheet that's folded.
And then what do? Take a knife and cut it? I mean, I have no
They
idea.
have big, large. They used diamond dust even in the 1880s.
Wow.
They used diamond dust. They used crushed garnet. They used corundum, which is nothing more than crushed sapphire, not jewelry grade, of course, but it was a tedious, expensive proposition to make.
Now, they did this after the glass had been formed, so it was cooled?
After it had been formed, it was cooled, yes.
So I would think it would also be quite a health risk possibility because of all that little
was one of
fine
the things
dust.
that caused the demise of the industry, and one of the reasons why you won't probably ever see it come back to the extent that it was.
Okay.
The other thing was just pure cost. These were high cost items to make,
And they're heavy.
and they're heavy.
They're heavy.
But basically, in the 1870s, late 70s, 1880s, 1890s, up to about 1922, 23, these were the de rigueur for a wedding present or an exquisite table setting.
And a lot of it, I guess, over time has probably gotten damaged because it is something that you have to be so careful with. So to find a piece today that's in good condition is pretty unusual.
Especially to find one that's not been repaired.
Yeah.
And that's even more unusual. Yeah, if you look at it from the standpoint of perfection, most of them don't have perfection. Probably 95% don't have perfection. If you really challenge it, it doesn't have it. But the value ascertained to the particular pieces, they give leeway for the little flea picks on them.
Mm-hmm.
Not for any major damage, but little ticks.
Little chatters and whatnot on it. Yeah.
Right. Now,
So what kind of price?
well, here's the thing with cut glass. If you look at the distributors' catalogs, they have big sections of cut glass from the 1870s all the way up to 1930.
Yes.
And by 1932, the section of cut glass was almost gone.
Wow.
Because what? You had the Depression, and
Is that how we got depression glass?
Depression glass was all molded glass.
Right, but is that what came
Right.
in after cut
Sure.
glass? Yeah.
It was cheap, easy to make, and from a distance, it looked just like the cut glass. From a distance.
Right, from a distance. Now, the other thing about cut glass is it has such more brilliance than what depression glass has.
Well, it's called the sunlight, the table setting.
Right.
It picked up I don't care whether it's sunlight or candlelight, it sparkled. And the idea was the Bella Park area where your jewelry was fine and large, your cut glass was bright and shiny. This is when they changed the china for every setting at a meal. We're not talking about the average household, we're talking about elegance.
And they had dishwashers, right?
Oh, yeah. One of the things I always thought was kind of interesting, I have a maid's contract.
You have a maid's contract?
A maid's contract.
How about that? I haven't seen that.
Oh, I didn't even know I had it. How's that?
Okay.
By looking through these, the ephemeral that we have, and I have a maid's contract. And one of the things in the maid's contract is things that come out of her salary.
Okay.
And, of course, they took a little stipend out for meals, I think 12 cents a day.
Okay.
But if she broke, chipped, or damaged the cut glass, woe be to her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that made them take extra care in taking care of it. Yeah. Now, what time frame was that? When's that maid's contract from?
1890s.
1890s. Wow. And where was that from? Here in the South, or was it
New
from
York
some
City.
New York City? New York City.
And one of the interesting things there was that her specific duties was count the knives every day.
Count the knives.
The kitchen knives. Count the knives, not the silverware.
The knives.
Count the knives.
Wow. You know, these are the things you just don't hear anywhere else, and that's why I feel so blessed to have the Vintager with us and be sharing his knowledge right here on the radio. You know, we're here at Sharp Facets Gallery every day, and of course, he's always telling people about things and finding unique and different things about it. So, I want you to stay tuned with us right now. We are going to hear South Carolina news, or maybe just the commercials, just see where we're at. I'm not exactly sure. But don't you go away, because we'll be right back.